Here's a place where all of us can be safe. Our stories of transformation can be safe, and all the things we want to research are safe here. This is Safe Space with Cheyenne. I'm really excited you're here, and I hope you stick around for a while, because I've got a lot to show you before I leave Earth. I love you guys.
How are all of my friends doing today? Are you doing well? Are you driving to work? Are you on vacation? Wherever you are, I hope you're having a safe and wonderful day. Today I'm bringing on Dr. Lisa Thompson, and she has a roster of things that we're going to talk about. But before I introduce her, I have to list off all of the amazing things that she can do and she has been doing. So first off, she's a best-selling author, she's a speaker, she's a Galactic ambassador, an intuitive transformational coach. She can do past life and parallel life regressions, which I cannot wait to get in on that. Quantum cosmic energy healing, human design, sound healing, and honestly so much more. So she's come on today to not only tell her story, but all of her passionate work that she's doing now. So thanks for coming on. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on.
I love it. I also know that you have your own podcast, Connection to the Cosmos with Dr. Lisa Thompson, so sorry. I was reading the description of it and it said, I have out of the world conversations with extraordinary people. And yes. I don't know if that's your tagline, but it definitely should be because it caught my attention. And I'm like, I wonder who you talk to. And I can't even imagine how just kind of out there for normal people, I would say these are, but you have to have like the most enticing stories on there.
I do. I love every guest. They're so different in terms of what their experiences are, what they can share with the audience. And generally, it's people who have some kind of modality or understanding of higher conscious reality, whether they're talking to angels or extraterrestrials or have just had experiences in those realms. A lot of different spiritual practitioners come on. And so we're able to talk about more of the metaphysical kinds of spiritual experiences. It's definitely not for those that are dogmatic religious people.
Mm-hmm. I found the same thing with my show, even though I try to bring on a variety of guests to, just show options, right? But my favorite guests are honestly metaphysical and spiritual and like holistic modalities. Those are my favorite. Those are what gets me thinking. It gets me inspired to take my power back and quit outsourcing it to other things. So I already knew when I saw you on the bill today, I'm like, we are going to have an out-of-world experience together. But before we get into all of that, where did this begin to you? Because your origin story is also one of my favorites too. I feel like you were ahead of the game right out the gate. Like I said, most of us went through the normal schools, high schools, college, whatever we did. And then if we had an awakening or came online of some sort, then we went down all of these beginner rabbit holes and stuff. But you grew up in an esoteric family. Would that be the correct way to say it?
Yeah. So my mother, since I was 2 years old when she divorced my dad, she first started out being an astrologer. So I remember as a young child, I'd go to astrology night classes with her. All her friends were either astrologers, numerologists, tarot card readers, psychics, witches, you name it. And so that was my world. When I was 13, though, we moved from Oklahoma City to Yelm, Washington, where we were members of the Ramtha School of Enlightenment. And so this is a spiritual school of higher conscious reality, where we were learning things like remote viewing, telepathy, how to enhance our clair senses. And really, that's where I got exposed or reminded of where we really come from and what we really are, because we are so much more than just this one earth human life. This is just one of many costumes that we wear and one experience in a vast, infinite number of experiences.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% on that. When you were a kid, though, were you like, this is weird, or was it just absolutely normal to you because you had already grown up around all of it?
Both.
Yeah.
The astrology part was normal, just because that's always what I was exposed to. When we moved to Washington, it was weird at first because the lady channels an ascended master from the time of Lemuria. So JZ Knight channels an entity known as Ramtha. And so as a 13-year-old back in 1986, I thought this was a little weird, but also coming from Oklahoma City, I had a lot of really hardcore Southern Baptist friends, and they and their parents were all trying to convince me that my mother was believing in the devil and things like that. So that got into my head just a little bit. But when I then experienced who Ramtha was, and I could feel the difference in the energy between Ramtha coming through the body versus just Jay-Z being her own normal ego self, complete night and day difference in the energy. But I did go to public high school, and a lot of our townspeople were very anti Ramtha school. And so I just tried to keep my head down as much as possible and be normal. But then, in my spare time, I was with my mom doing the stuff with the school.
Every time, I think we talked about this before, and immediately like the picture of like Nevermore on the Wednesday series came to mind, where they had like the normal kids in the town, and then they had all these like extra stuff sprinkled into the kids over here. And that's what it makes me picture when you were going to school, and like they were like, oh, she went to that school.
Yes, actually it was very much like that. Our little town had maybe 28 churches, and it's a town of 1,000 to 2,000 people at that time when we moved there. And so there was a huge dichotomy between those of us that were participating with the Ramtha school versus the normal kind of farm religious people.
Yeah, the dogmatic religion is probably a really good way to say it. I have talked to many religious people over time and explain like my view of it is how boxed in everything is. And I get so much pushback on that it blows my mind. Like they give me cognitive dissonance, and like my beliefs are good on the things that I've experienced or my friends have experienced. But that boxing in thing, I get it from like my past and the way that I grew up. But yours fascinates me so much because you had all of this exposure from a young age, and then when the world gets you, they're like, no, that's not the correct narrative. That's not the correct narrative. And they try to, in however many ways they do, to, like you said, like your mom is into devil worship or something, which is the common thing that you get from any of this, whether it's Reiki or anything interdimensional. So as I'm picturing your story like roll through my head, the resilience that you had to have had as a kid as well to be able to put up with that, but also like the hormones, the conflicting ideologies, and then you experiencing your own truth, which ultimately I would say made you go online much faster than anybody else.
Yeah. Well, and what I realize now is that I did specifically choose to be born into my mother to not have to forget where we can come from and who we are. And so the whole thing was really interesting because even when I was graduating from my high school, we still had a prayer at our graduation, and my mom and my physics teacher went to court against the school to stop the prayer. And so and they won. And so the townspeople were so angry. We were getting really nasty phone calls. And because of my maiden last name, it's Rosenberger, which is German, but people thought we were Jewish. And so we'd get calls, get out of town, you Jews, and just so much hate from the town.
Those small towns, though, I mean, they pack a punch. And I mean, they really just want it the way that their ancestors settled it. They really, really do.
Yeah. So what I learned, I guess, from that is, and I learned who my true friends were, because the friends that I thought were my friends were actually not at all. What it did, though, was it really helped me know that it's safe to stand up for what what words you need to speak. That doesn't mean everyone's going to like it or agree with it, but nothing really happened to us. We got threats, but I'm still here. My mother is still here.
Yeah.
And her strength and just fighting for what she believes in, and just was a beautiful role model for me to move through my life.
And especially with all the experiences you had. So 15 years old, you have a encounter.
Yes.
That I'd love for you to unpack for all of us.
Okay. So when I was 15, I was taken onto a spacecraft. And this was my first conscious memory of being on a craft. But what I now understand is that I had been with this particular group multiple times throughout my childhood. But so this specific time, I'm 15, I get picked up in the craft. And it was just me and my ET guide. Now, when he picked me up, he looked very human. And he also felt very familiar, like I knew him. So I didn't have any fear. And what I remember is flying through space. The spacecraft looked like it had completely transparent walls where you could just fully see out into space. So it was beautiful. You could see the darkness, the pinpoints of the starlight as you're flying through the gas layers, just the beautiful colors. And so we finally get to where we were going, and I asked him, where are we? He said that we were inside of Io, which is one of Jupiter's moons. And then he started touring me around what looked like kind of a hospital situation or a doctor's office, where I could see into these different examination rooms and see humans being examined. Nothing scary, no probes or anything, but everyone looked really human. So my question to my guide was, are you human? Because everyone looks so human, or not. And he said that they were not human, they were humanoid, but they disguise themselves, their form, because it's really extreme and it would scare people. And that was not their intent, was to scare people. And so my next question to him was, well, why are we here, and why specifically am I here? And this was in 1988. What he said is that those of us that had been chosen to be brought there were being tested to see if something happened to the Earth, if we could be brought to live in an environment like that or something similar. Now, in 88, we're still in a Cold War. Mm-hmm. You know, we are on the verge of World War III. And so there was a real timeline where something really could have happened to Earth. So then at the end of the tour, I asked him if I could see what he looked like, because I loved animals. I was obsessed with animals growing up. The weirder, the better. So I didn't think I would have any fear. So he showed me his true form, and he ended up being about 7 feet tall, pure white skin, big dark eyes, and long red hair, and what looked like triangles or triads tattooed on his cheeks. And so the form of him was so extreme and large that if someone was dreaming about that, or, you know, saw someone like that coming down the road, likely there would be some fear associated with it. But this group, completely benevolent, obviously their intentions were to help us, not to do anything scary or bad, which a lot of people have some misconceptions about abduction scenarios, mm-hmm. temporary detainment scenarios. But so then I remember coming back home, and I was laying in my bed, and I'm like, okay, this is the weirdest dream I've ever had. So at first I did think it was just a dream, but I was remembering all the details. And with dreams, you do not really remember details. Mm-hmm. But then fast forward a few months later, we had moved to a different house, and I was in my bedroom reading Whitley Strieber's book, Communion. And that's his book about his experiences with the gray aliens. Mine were not grays, but at the end of his book, he's interviewing different people that had had similar experiences as him. And all of them had gray ET experiences, except for one guy had a totally different story, where he was telling Whitley that he had been taken to a moon of Jupiter and told he was one of the chosen ones. And Whitley made a little side comment, kind of sarcastic, I hope it isn't Io. And when I read that, my body, head to toe chills, tears started coming down my face. And so that was my body's way of saying, okay, that was a real experience, not just a dream. So because we were already in the spiritual school and learning about, you know, higher dimensional realities and extraterrestrials, fairies, you know, things that are not part of our physical 3D world, mm-hmm. I knew my mother would believe me if I told her. So I went and told her. She got really excited. And our school in the 80s was notorious for, we had a couple of famous actresses that attended the school, but the CIA and government were really interested in what we were learning. So they actually sent spies to infiltrate the school. And some of those people became real students. Well, one of the ones that my mother knew had been very high government, and he knew about the different AT races that our government works with and knows about. And so she introduced me. I told him my story. And when I was describing them, he's like, I don't know that specific race, but he said, we don't know all of them. There are so many out there. He said, but you had a real experience. And so having that validated, I was 16 at that time, and having that validated by someone in the know and my body validating it, you know, really what it did was plant a seed for the work I do now as Galactic Ambassador. Because my mission is really to change the fear-based narrative of the media, Hollywood, and government, because they all are trying to spin it as we need to perceive this as a threat. And that really is not the case at all. If they wanted to take over the ETs, if they wanted to really take over, they could have done so a long time ago. They have the technology, you know, to overpower us. Most of them are part of our galactic family. And so they don't want to hurt us. They actually are trying to help us without going against our free will.
I love that you added in with not going against the free will. I love watching Galactic Messages on Gaia. Have you ever listened to that or watched that? Yes, Taigetans. I always want to make sure I say it right. The first time I came across that, I was like, okay, I'm going to watch this, and I know it's going to blow my mind, so just give myself time. And they were like just asking all of the questions I'm certainly curious about, like, what is karma to you? What is it like over there? Why are you even helping us? All of this stuff, because, I mean, even like in a species division, we're like, why would you care about us if we're all the way down here? And I love the way that they explained it, that we're all one, we all come from the same thing. And even though, like, you're obviously further down in a density, they were even discussing, like, the fact that 3D is, like, locked into it. So, like, there's so many spacecrafts around Earth that, like, they don't even have, we have no idea how many are actually there, but they're here monitoring the situation, and they want to help us evolve and elevate. They don't want us to go down any further in consciousness, because, I mean, if you want to talk about hell, Earth is headed there, right? Yes. Dimensionally, we are falling so far down in these energetic densities that I honestly, from the people I've talked to and the research I've done, there have been more extraterrestrial contactees, experiencers, and even people waking up in this time more than I've studied, even like when I started looking at Dolores Cannon's work. And even for you, for example, with going to school in the 80s, the internet's not really around where you can Google stuff and be like, what is this? What is this? So you had to, at some time, felt kind of isolated and alone with this information, because, like, where do you go and find this? So even having the validation from, like, the guy from the CIA, I think that's crazy. And then for him to infiltrate the school and then be like, whoa, like, what they're doing here makes sense on a quantum level. It makes absolute sense. I love stories like that. I wish my family would hear those and be like, okay, maybe there is more out there, you know?
Well, the interesting thing is that, you know, when we look at the whole history, the modern history of ufology in the United States. So back in the 40s, they really started this disinformation campaign that they have been propagating for like 80 years. Well, in 2020, right in the middle of COVID, the Pentagon actually admits fully that this is real phenomena, that there are real spacecraft visiting us. But because it was announced during COVID, it was basically hidden, you know, among the mass hysteria that people were going through. And so people are waking up. One of the things that I do here in Hawaii is UFO tours, where we do a night sky watch using advanced Generation 3 military night vision goggles. And with that, because I know how to identify, let's say, satellites and airplanes and shooting stars, because they all have very predictable behavior. When you know what that behavior is and you check your satellite apps and you see all the stuff that is going on that doesn't fit in our normal, perceived reality, like a massive transit highway up there with all of these craft. And so our guests that come on the tour, they're just amazed. They're like, I didn't even know there was that much activity. And I'm like, there is. You just have to know how to look for it. And so, the Pleiadians, the Galactic Federations, all of them are watching over us. They do occasionally help out in terms of if a bomb or a weapon is launched, they have been known to divert them, shut them down. And
yes, the missile sites.
Yes, exactly. And even, I don't know if you remember back in 2018, North Korea had launched a nuclear missile towards Hawaii.
Yes.
And there was a massive panic. I wasn't living here in Hawaii yet, but I do remember it. And after half an hour of people thinking basically they were going to be destroyed, half an hour later, it was like, false alarm. Well, you can't just have a false alarm like that without it being a real threat, a perceived threat. And so what I discovered recently was an article where there had been lights around this weapon over the ocean, and it didn't end up hitting Hawaii because essentially the ETs helped take care of that.
See, and I think that's really what we need help with right now is all these crazy people with their trigger figures on all of these nukes, just treating everybody like countries of ants, and that our populations are completely insignificant. And I always, when I came across, like the first time I read about them basically like stalking the missile silos and just a lot of activity around those places, especially like active ones that, even like missile sites and all of that. And I put myself in their perspective as much as I can because I'm still only human, but I'm still like looking down on us, and I'm like, these children are going to kill everybody on this planet, and they don't even care. They're just like, oh, I want to be the most biggest and power. Like, it's such an oppressive movement that it's just, it's annoying at this point. I don't watch the news, but I do have to pull up my web browser and it'll have random stories on it. And I try not to look at it, but sometimes I do. And I'm like, I feel like the news is a movie these days. Like, the shit that they're doing makes zero sense, that these are the people that are in charge of these countries and these populations. Zero compassion for anybody that they're actually supposed to be helping. No wonder there's so much ET activity.
Yes. Well, and to that point, we are part of their family. So there's that, they're kind of like our parents watching, just like you said, we're toddlers on this earth spiritually. But everything that we do here on Earth has a ripple effect out into the solar system, into our galaxy, and even in the universe. And so even if we weren't related to them, what our actions here on Earth really do affect them directly. And so, there was a Venusian, so an ET from Venus, who was known to have been at the Pentagon in the 1950s for 3 months. His name is Valiant Thor. And he interacted with Pentagon, with Eisenhower, and what his agenda was to try to get them to stop developing the nuclear weapons because of that ripple effect. And obviously, the conversation didn't work, obviously, because here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
They have come down. They've interacted with the government, and there are different groups that really are looking out for us.
They have to have such a high level of compassion just because of how annoyed I am at the stupidity I think it is. And it's kind of like gimmicky and comicky. That's the best way that I play it out in my head to process it. But I'm just like picturing two like Galactic Federation ships talking or updating, and it's like, well, we helped them with this technology and they built a weapon. It's like, okay, go to 1960s. Well, we helped them with this technology and they built another weapon. 70s, 80s, like on and on and on. Like all of this like fighting over resources and all this crazy stuff, I always go out to some galactic perspective because I'm like, somebody's looking down on us. Like 5D's looking at 4D, 4D's looking at 3D, 3D can't see shit below them because they don't believe in shit but the 3D, so it's getting pretty weird. But from that perspective, like, have you had conversations, obviously, with multiple entities, and they're basically all saying the same thing, like, we're not here to hurt you, we're here for you, we're all part of our family, please get them to quit building nukes. Like, is there, I know they can't go against free will by any means, and it really is about a consciousness expansion if we want to be able to talk to them.
Yeah.
With you having such an open mind and being able to kind of accelerate that, is that something that you also like to do with your books as well, is deliver those messages from them? Like, this is what they're communicating to me?
For sure. And last year, my book, Connection to the Cosmos, Remembering Your Galactic Heritage and Embracing Your Oneness, that was my first book on this topic, where I was sharing some of the channeled information from my Arcturians, sharing about what this phenomena is, people understanding the different densities or dimensions, because, you know, anything in third and fourth dimensional reality experiences polarity, good, bad, negative, positive, black, white, right? And what that is good for, if we're going to judge it as good or bad, is it's a mechanism of evolution, which I love because I have a PhD in evolutionary biology. And so there's evolution in everything. And so, yeah, now this year I've been doing a lot more channeling of other groups in addition to my Arcturians. And they're all higher dimensional beings, and they all have an understanding. Once we hit fifth dimension and higher, all of the entities understand love, unity, that we are all one. And so the Taygete and Pleiadians, you know, whether it's the Arcturians, Assyrians, any of the different groups that are resonating in those higher dimensions, they see that from that higher perspective, that, you know, there is no more duality. People accept others for whatever their beliefs, whatever they're doing. There isn't the judgment. And ultimately, we are evolving as a consciousness here on Earth. And sometimes it gets really ugly and dark first before the light emerges, right? And the other thing that is really interesting from a quantum perspective is that my Arcturians and others are always sharing that all timelines exist simultaneously. And so there already is a timeline where the Earth has been destroyed, you know, in our, you know, upcoming future time. Basically, we weren't able to divert that. But there's also timelines that exist where people are waking up. We have shifted to fifth dimensional reality. And so we all have an individual choice on which reality we want to be living in, because they all exist. And so one of the things that the advice, I guess, of the Arcturians, and I also did learn this through Ramtha as well, is that the more that we focus on what we actually want in our life, joy, passion, love, you know, ease and flow, connection with the universe, the more that we live as if that is our reality, then that does become our reality. So we don't, even with all the crazy stuff going on, it doesn't necessarily direct us or affect us directly, well, only if we allow it to, essentially.
And it does sound, it's easier said than done when you start to, yes, picturing it, putting it into action and doing it, which I was just watching, I think it was a Mel Robbins TikTok that came up, and it was talking about if that's the person you want to be, then you have to picture, visualize, and act as that person, and eventually your brain will redo all of its chemicals for you, basically, and you will eventually be that person. But waking up every day and starving those old pathways really is harder, and I've seen the videos. I wish I knew what it was called. It's two kids that are talking telepathically, and they're talking about their times reincarnating on Earth, or like one. And I'll have to send it to you because it's adorable, and I guess it's a whole series. But one of these, they look like kids, but they're talking telepathically, and one of them was like, oh man, my craziest incarnation I ever had was when I went to Earth. And the other one just goes, you went to Earth? And she was like talking about, you know, all the suffering and the struggles. And she goes, here, when you think about it, it manifests immediately. It's a higher density, you know, we work with this energy. She goes, but down there, it takes so much longer. So there's so much more downtime to divert yourself away from those goals or giving up on them because it's taking so long to manifest down there.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And the more that we practice, the easier and faster it becomes, because when we are already elevating our energy into that higher frequency, because we are multidimensional, we have the ability to shift our consciousness into fifth dimensional reality. And so the more that we like practice that and hold that energy, the faster that we are able to manifest, because we trust that it's going to come. And the more that we just know and trust the universe will provide this or something better, then it happens. It's when
I love the higher timeline affirmations too. Those are really good for me, especially after I wake up from my sleep meditations. My alarm goes off and I know I'm programmable. So I slip in those. I'm on my highest timeline when my feet hit the ground. Like anything that I can do to just elevate to that positivity and that blissful level that you get to feel.
Yes. And well, because we all have a choice of, right, of how we want to wake up, how we intentionally set our day, and how we respond to things throughout our day. We have a choice in every part of that.
So veering over to clairsenses, that's got to be like one of my favorite topics to talk about, especially because I like breaking it down from a beginner perspective, from somebody that was raised to believe that 1, they're demonic, 2, it's impossible, 3, you have to have like a family lineage, it can be gifted, not everybody can do this, yada, 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 yada. But they're just spiritual muscles to me. That's how I like to describe them to people. So for you, you can activate all of them. I think there's a certain passion that you have towards a couple that you can kind of use together. Do you use all 5 of them, or what are your favorite or most in tune, I would say?
So very good question. They definitely are developed at different levels. So of all the clairsenses, one of my strongest is claircognizance, which is clear knowing. Like I will just know an answer to something without having any evidence to back it up, but it just comes so clearly. And that one can be really challenging for people externally, because they're like, well, how do you know? And I'm like, because I just know.
It like triggers egos all day long.
Yeah. Clairsentience is another really strong one for me. So that's the clear feeling. And so that's when you get the goosebumps on your arms, when your body, I have that gut feeling. And in human design, I know we were going to talk about that potentially, but in human design, I have sacral inner authority. So my gut really does tell me my answers, and that's part of a clairsentience kind of experience. My clairaudience is fairly good. I do hear things. I get random things. Probably the least of the developed ones for me is the clairvoyance. I can see things, but I'm not like a medium. I don't. I haven't practiced that, and I know that all of the clair abilities, we can, just like you said, it's a muscle. We can learn how to enhance them. It's a practice, right?
What are ways that you practice, maybe not in your school, like what tips and tricks really fit with you that you took with you in your life to continue to strengthen the clairsenses that you obviously wanted to utilize? I'm kind of with you on clairvoyance. I also have like a fear-based aspect of it, because when I came online, I was seeing a bunch of stuff and I was like, well, that's too much for me. And I've had a couple mentors along the way that have helped me. But I think that's one that I'm going to put on like my 40-year-old list. Like I think like my 30s, I really want to study energy and I want to study body mapping and meridian lines. My clairaudience is killer. I would like to develop that in a more controlled sense, because there's always people talking in my right ear. I just have no idea sometimes who it is. So then I go back into like checking my vibe to make sure like nothing's infiltrated anything, which if you are a Christian, that's a completely triggering sentence. But for me, it's just like, it's all energy, you know, like that's all it is. It's mostly people's loved ones when I'm walking by them too. So tips and tricks that you picked up that you like to keep with you.
Well, I mean, I guess one of the biggest things is trusting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, that knowing, okay, I have this. I don't have. It's not special people. Yes. Some people have been, I guess, never shut down. Like as kids, everyone is so wide open and experiences things. But then if you're seeing things or hearing things, then a lot of children get shut down by their families saying, you know, you're just making that up. That's your imaginary friend. Or exactly. Yeah. And so people then learn to close it. The veil comes down over them. And so we can lift the veil again. Really, tips and tricks, it depends on which one you want to enhance, I would say. Mm-hmm. But for me, again, like the clairsentience, trusting the physiology of my body, mm-hmm. and being tuned in, like pay attention. A lot of people are not tuned in, mm-hmm. to their bodies. They're not tuned in even to things that they might be hearing that are coming in, or images that are coming into their mind, the knowing. So it's really just starting to be aware of the information that you're getting, the signs that you're getting. So paying attention and acknowledging. And the more that you acknowledge and you get feedback from whatever surroundings that the information you're getting is correct for you, mm-hmm. well, that feeds itself.
Perfect answer. I meant to ask this right after the spaceship question, so this is completely out of chronological order, but that's fine. Did your experience on the spaceship make you want to go into the form of biology that you studied when you got your PhD?
So actually had nothing to do with it whatsoever. Okay. Good question. So as I mentioned earlier, I basically as a child was obsessed with animals. I loved animals, and the weirder, the better. And so I would spend hours drawing them and learning about them. And I also had a very artistic side to me, but growing up in my family, it was like, you know, you have to have a practical career. You know, art isn't a career. And so science seemed very safe. Mm-hmm. And because I had a passion for the animals, that's where I focused my attention. So I knew that since I was 9 years old, wanted to study sharks because they were misunderstood.
Oh, I love sharks.
I wanted people to understand, you know, what they really were. Well, so by the time I got to grad school.
I know you'll love this, so I'm going to show it to you.
Love that, yes.
For the listeners, it's my Megalodon shark tooth collection.
Love it. And yeah, so when I got to grad school and had to decide what I was actually going to study, I ended up studying the flat sharks. And instead of your typical, you know, shark style, the flat sharks are the skates, stingrays, manta rays, eagle rays, etc.
Those are all the ones that hang on the sandbars. They like swim around with like lemon sharks and stuff like that.
And some of the stingrays do, okay. The southern, yeah. And some of them are up in the water column, like the manta rays. And so actually I named my company Mystic Manta because the manta ray is my number one spirit animal. So anyway, so I was studying the evolution of these. And even though I was studying, you know, fish, I was at University of Chicago, had a joint position at the Field Museum of Natural History. And what's really interesting is that science is very dogmatic, kind of like religion in terms of you have to think within certain parameters that are acceptable in order to get grant money. And if you're thinking anything outside of those parameters, then likely you're not going to get funded. Mm-hmm. And so even though I had had ET experiences, I knew people that had had Sasquatch experiences in Washington. I believed in mermaids and fairies, but yet I'm being trained to be this like mainstream scientist.
Does it make you laugh now?
People thought I was crazy. Like my friends, they thought that I was crazy for believing that these other things could exist. And they didn't believe my ET story either, which, whatever. That was on them. But I learned very quickly, okay, I have to be normal if I want to be taken seriously. However, with the evolutionary biology, it was interesting because there were all of these missing links. So not only in human evolution, we have a lot of missing links going from one kind of anatomy and physiology to an extreme shift. But we have that throughout the entire animal kingdom. And so it started opening my mind of like, okay, well, what is going on here? We don't have any transitional species like we're taught in Darwinian evolution. And now what I understand, at least for human evolution, but I do think this is true probably for animals, general animals, is that we have had ET intervention on Earth since the beginning of time. And they have modified our bodies, inserted, like combined their genetics with ours. And so really that is what those missing links are, those jumps, is that we have been an experiment where ultimately we are shifting to that higher consciousness, being able to channel more energy through our bodies as we're shifting to fifth dimension. And so we've needed to upgrade the body.
Mm-hmm. So I can back this up so hard, and I wish that I would have researched this video. I knew that we were going to talk about DNA, so I'm going to try not to just butcher it really quick, because everything you're saying is correct, especially just apes to what? Look at all the technology advances, which I'll get into that in a minute. So Greg Braden, do you know him?
I know him,
okay.
Yeah.
I love all the stuff that he delivers, and I love the access that you have to all of the mind-blowing stuff that he talks about. Go check him out on YouTube if you're listening. He talks about, so basically like this like strip of DNA, right, that goes all the way back, however many years that we're talking about, and there's this splice in it. And the only thing that modern day science can come up with on this splice right here is that literally we were like injected, our DNA was injected with extraterrestrial. So then the next question, after they were able to publish that paper and not get murdered, it was like, okay, well, what were we spliced with? So then now they start going down the rabbit hole where it's just, I know like our physical bodies are like from the earth and souls from the sky and all of that, but how many different type of aliens have we been like planted with, so to speak? Because there are people that really identify, but how many?
Yeah. The exact number is questionable because I've heard as low as 13, but I've heard up to 22 different ET races. And I know specific ones for sure that have been interacting on Earth. And so, we have the Pleiadians, the Sirians, the Orions. We have a program right now with the Zetas. The Lyrans have been here, the Vegans. So there are groups like that have come at different times and done different things with us. Reptilians is another one.
I was going to say, can you speak on what's your take on the reptilian agenda or reptilians in general? I've heard stories where some work with the government. I've heard some have left the reptilian agenda. We hate humans. We're trying to destroy them from the inside out, and they're actually helping humans. I had a reptilian, I know you'll love this. I had a reptilian come in my friend's dream, and it was one of those dreams, right, where he remembered every detail. He called me right when he woke up, and he's like, I woke up, I looked in the mirror, and I was a reptilian, and it was speaking to me, and I got so terrified because then when I stepped out of the room, I wasn't even in my house or in my room. I didn't know where I was, but it looked familiar. He's like, but this reptilian started talking to me and telling me that I actually don't need to be scared. He's one of the good ones. There are bad ones out there, but I'm one of the good ones. I'm here to help humanity.
Yes. So thank you for asking that question, because I get that on the tours a lot too. People are afraid of the reptilians and they're afraid of the grays because that's been the PR campaign against them. Mm-hmm. So the way that I like to explain this is when we have people like us or beings, races that are living a third, fourth dimensional reality, like we talked about before, there's polarity. So we have, if we look at Earth humans, we have some people here on Earth that are completely kind, compassionate, loving, service to others kind of people. And then we also have individuals on Earth that are the complete opposite of that, right? They're murdering, they're control, power hungry, etc. And so anytime you have a race that is experiencing that third, fourth dimensional reality, there's still polarity. So there are individuals within a group that might have a service to self agenda, and there might be individuals that understand that we are all one and love. But again, we have different reptilian races that are in this third, fourth dimensional reality, but we have a lot of the races of reptilians that have either shifted or never like downshifted to our density that experience love, unity, and are some of the most amazing, wise, teachers in our universe. And we all have reptilian ancestors, every one of us. And so really the way that people are going to experience these beings, if someone is resonating in a really high state of vibration of joy and passion and love, that is what they're going to bring into their reality, right? It's very frequency specific. Anything that doesn't resonate at that high vibe frequency cannot come into the space. And so people who are resonating in a little bit lower frequency, maybe being victimized, depression, things like that, because they're lower vibe, well, then the entities that they're calling in are frequency specific to that energy. But there really is no good or bad. And we have ultimate control over our lives and our reality.
I love it. And I love that no matter what entity you talk to, especially if they're working on the right team, it always goes back to this one source of just pure unconditional love. And I really think with the loneliness epidemic going on in the world, which is really crazy with all the technology that we have, right? But we're all seeking this connection. And I do understand the seeking of human connection, but what I think that we're all missing the mark on is we're actually just missing home and where we actually all come from. I think we've all been down here a really long time, or other places where we can go and evolve and learn lessons. I don't want to think that reincarnation is just for Earth. But I think we're all really tired, and I think that's another reason that more people are waking up in their own way. Like people you would never in a million years think maybe they had like a near-death experience, they lost a loved one, all of these things that make them kind of wonder what's on the other side of the veil. And then they start looking, and they're like, oh my gosh, I've had it all wrong my whole life. Like, look at all this that's out there. And you kind of feel silly. Like I felt silly when I was younger because I, like people who believed in aliens and stuff, especially where I grew up, I was like, no, that's impossible. We're the only ones. And then it would be almost like gaslit in a way, or like propaganda, where it was like, well, if they were out there, they would have taken us over, or we would have already talked to them by now. Like all these like random excuses for why higher intelligence would actually come and talk to us. It's like the senior going out with the freshman. It's not going to happen, right? But I just still find it hilarious now from that mindset of being like, how could I have been so limited, like that freaking limited, to believe that we're the only thing here and nothing else is out there?
Yeah. Well, and that's just, that's part of that veil that comes down over us when we go through the birth canal. We go through the tunnel of forgetfulness, and really
the birth canal.
so that it's our kind of our job, but it doesn't have, there's no judgment about how long or how many lives it takes someone to wake up. But really that is kind of this earth experiment, is remembering like, oh, this is just a game. This is just one of many costumes that I'm wearing, one of many experiences.
Which, I don't really know like the terminologies that you use and don't use, because everyone uses it different, but do you use higher self or future self in any form of your terminology when you do channeling or anything like that?
Higher self, yes. Not. I don't use past and future anymore. I'm trying to switch that to parallel, because the quantum idea of all timelines existing simultaneously. So even though in our Earth experience, things are so slow and dense, it's like molasses. We experience linear time. However, when you shift into those higher dimensions, time doesn't exist. And you can move around. Like you're not stuck in, okay, it's only forward movement. And so when we remember that as humans, we can actually timeline shift, and we can go back and rewire ourselves from our childhood. We can do all sorts from other lives. So nothing is fixed. It's just, there's so much, like you said earlier, religious dogma that trains a lot of people that this is the only way that it is. However, that's not true.
And if you believe anything else, you're burning in a fiery hell. Man, they got me on that when I was younger. Okay, so now that we're talking about past and parallel lives, you do regressions, is that right?
Yeah, so regression is another word for hypnosis or deep relaxation. And so what this kind of method does is that if the practitioner is good at what they're doing, they are getting you to a deep enough level in your subconscious mind where all experiences, all memories are tucked away. You can access all these different timelines. And if something comes up, so it can be used as a healing modality. So if there's a blockage or limitation, it might stem from this life, but it might also stem from another life that you're not even aware that you're bringing that energy in. And so we can change the story, we can rewire the brain. So that's a beautiful thing, but it also helps people understand how much more they are, like what they really are, that they are simply energy and consciousness, not a physical body. And again, it's just, we're jumping around. We choose to come into different experiences, different lives to learn and grow and gain wisdom to feed back ultimately to source, from my understanding. But the more that we are seeing that, we then also understand the connections that we have with other people, because we are connected to every single person on this earth, in our solar system, in the universe. We all are connected to each other. And so really here on earth, we're just experiencing each other as mirrors. And we may like that mirror, we may not like that mirror.
My mouth. I was like, so do you believe we're all mirrors for each other? Because sometimes that's an easier pill to swallow than other times when you're like, oh, I have nothing in common with this person standing in front of me that's pissing me off. There's just no way. And then you're like, oh my gosh, they're reflecting something I do not want to accept in myself.
Yes, that has been my experience for sure.
I love it so much. You also, you do sound healing, but you also do human design. So where did you get certified in sound healing?
So actually there's an online company that I went through, a woman named Vicki Gould, who I got trained by, and I bought my bowls and practiced. And so the sound, I was really inspired to do that for my Arcturians. And I think from my Syrians as well, because last year, one of the lives that I got to experience of one of my parallel lives was actually super ancient Egypt during the time when the pyramids were being built, which is far longer than 5,000 years ago that our modern archaeology thinks it is. The mainstream archaeology is not correct. Greg Braden and Graham Hancock and those people researching definitely fall more in line with them.
Absolutely.
But so getting to see the technology that the Syrians were bringing to Egypt to build the pyramids was sound levitation thought technology. And so sound, the vibration of sound, number one, it can heal our bodies, but it can do so much more than that as well. And so, knowing how important sound is, I just was called, like, I had never thought about getting trained in sound healing before that. I'm not a musician, but there was something telling me I had to do it. And so now I've incorporated it into my different classes. pulling in the energy of these different galactic groups. I use it on my UFO tours, on the spiritual journey. I use it to help people in their regressions to clear out trauma, and that's part of the energy healing. So it's a combination and multiple modalities that I'm doing to help people really shift that energy, the stuck energy.
I love it. I call it my Mary Poppins bag. I just keep learning and adding to it because not everybody heals the same, and it's definitely not linear. I could repeat that all day long, and as a reminder to myself as well when you're kind of breaking through some new levels. But sound healing I find really fascinating just from studying like Hertz frequencies and what even looking at, I think it's cymatics, I hope I said that correctly, where they put like sand down and then play certain frequencies, and it shows like even like sacred geometry or just regular geometry patterns, whatever you think it's called.
Yes.
And I was blown away by it because I'm trying to like picture what I'm trying to say in my head. There's this video that I saw, again, it was probably on Gaia, and they were showing these like diseased cells moving and fixing and like blowing away and coming back like in a new form where they were able to heal faster because this frequency came up and basically made them get their shit together, is what I was getting from the documentary. But seeing the science part of it and then the music side of it, and honestly, I've never been around any like sound bowl where I was like, oh, that's annoying, shut that off. You know, it's just always so, it's such a peaceful feeling. So I love that you also add those into your healing modalities.
Yes, well, and my favorite bowl to use if there's any kind of healing that needs to be done is the 528 hertz bowl, because that specifically carries a frequency of healing your cells and your DNA, just like you're talking about.
Yeah, so your eyes are lighting up when you say DNA, and that's how I feel when I go down any rabbit holes. I'm like, oh, we're going to learn about DNA today. This is going to make so much sense. Yes. So tell me about human design, because this is also a service that you offer to others, but it is a very grounded approach, in my opinion. So I want to hear more about this.
So so my mother was an astrologer when I was growing up. And even though I learned a little bit of astrology here and there, I was never called to really learn it in depth to become a professional astrologer. But when I was first introduced to human design, which I think was 9 or 10 years ago now, I had a coach in Olympia who did human design as a modality. And when she did my chart and explained some things about me, the information, which does have an aspect of astrology in it, what it did for me was it really helped identify how I operate best in this earth life as Lisa. Because even though we are galactic, we are higher dimensional beings, all of us that are here right now on Earth, we are having this Earth experience for a reason, right? So we need to understand why we're here, what we're doing, how to operate to make life easier, because sometimes Earth school can be extremely challenging. And so with human design, what it did was help me understand myself better and like why I do the things that I do, how I'm wired. And then I had the opportunity to start really learning it to do it for my clients as well. And so I love the balance of, okay, yes, we're these, we can really go out there and be very airy fairy, but I'm also really, again, we're here on Earth for a reason. Mm-hmm. And so
I have found people that go through an awakening process, myself included, whether it's a massive form of destabilization after, they come online in a way. I hope I didn't just lose that train of thought because I really liked it. Oh, great, it's back. But they're like, okay, I'm awake, I get it now, it's a play, it's this, it's that. And then they get kind of like this false concept in their mind that like now everything's going to be love and light and I'm vibrating higher and I don't have to worry about paying the rest of this karma back on this soul contract, like I'm good, I get it. Like you're like a character in The Good Place that figured out that they were in hell the whole time. And I remember like questioning those moments where I was like, okay, like, this is the takeoff. It's going to feel better. It's going to get super weird now. Like, I have to tell my husband I see dead people. That's going to be weird for him to figure out, what he wants to do with our life now. But I feel like it's like a step in the awakening process almost, especially like the longer you've been asleep and then you wake up, you're like, oh, I get it now. Like, this is just all suffering. And I'm like, well, there's things you came here to do that, yes, you can humanize it and say this is suffering, but like, what's the silver lining? What are you getting out of it? So when you have clients, have you had clients that come into some sort of awakening in themselves? They're like, okay, I get it now. And then you kind of have to like remind them and ground them. Like, don't forget, like, I'm glad you're talking to your higher self now and you see your future and your goals are ahead of you. But like, what are you doing for Lisa, right? This is Lisa's incarnation. We have to honor her soul contract.
Yes. So I would say definitely my clients that have these aha moments and really they get over fear of death and other things because they understand that we're just changing energy form. But again, we are all here choosing to live this earth experience for whatever we're meant to do here. And so the more that we know ourselves as this, ego personality of Lisa, but then also knowing that does not define me. It's not really who I am ultimately. It's just something that I'm doing right now. It can help understand that it's a game and know how to play the game easier.
Mm-hmm. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So I like knowing about myself through human design, astrology, hand analysis, numerology, you name it.
Mm-hmm.
What I have found is all those different modalities really do help explain who I am, like what I came here to do, and again, to make my life easier. So human design has made my life way easier, and to trust that gut instinct that I have rather than overriding it with logic, which I used to do, and keep myself stuck in really not comfortable situations, whether it was in career or relationship.
Me to tap back in there for sure. I didn't go deep enough into it, but I definitely need to go back to it. It is one of my favorites for you really to understand, like, why I am the way. Why do I do this? Why do I do this? Oh, I can fix this. Oh, that's why I react that way. Really powerful stuff. I remember I did a group chat with my siblings and was like, just fill this out, please, and send me your chart. I need to know how to deal. And I sent it to multiple friends because, again, they are like very grounded. They don't really go for all the stuff that I either talk about or do. So if I can find anything that's super grounded, I'll definitely pass it along to my family in hopes that they'll play that game along with me as well.
Yes.
So what are your future goals? Do you want to continue to obviously do the tours in Hawaii and speak, write more books, channel?
Yep.
Is there a next level, or is this expanding on all the things that you're already building right now?
So yeah, the work that I'm doing, it keeps kind of growing, but also morphing into what it is. Fortunately, I don't feel like boxed in with this spiritual business. It can go so many different ways. When I was boxed in with academia, and even when I was an interior designer, I was really boxed in. I felt like there wasn't much room for growth in those areas. And so, this year I'm focusing on writing another book that is being channeled, but it is also different stories from my clients and their experiences having non-earth lives and the messages they're receiving in our sessions from their galactic family and guides, really trying to continue changing that fear-based narrative. I'm leading a galactic retreat this year in September, which is really meant to work on the practices of enhancing the clairs, telepathy, remote viewing, really learning how to connect and even start channeling that energy yourself, because everyone is a channel, and some people are more open to what they are channeling than others. But it's all, we'll see what happens. Right now I am on this galactic train and I love it. And I love the experiences that I'm getting to have with these beings, because they're just incredibly loving, beautiful, wise,
I
and
think you get just taught so much. I mean, I can't imagine the stuff that you feel and see and hear and the way that you're able to communicate that back to humanity, your clients, however you're putting it out into the world. And I love the idea of the retreats, especially for like people who are advanced, even to like beginner curiosity phase, where it's just like, can I really do this? Whether they haven't experienced the first time themselves or not, from obviously all the blocks and not trusting their intuition, but even just being in a safe community where they can see and experience this. I just think that, to me, that is the Lord's work, but don't quote me, I guess.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how many people are ready to do this kind of work.
Well, I think it's just going to continue to grow.
I think so. And the more that people are seeing things on the news and it's being talked about, the more that they're going to, I guess, be comfortable with the idea that there are extraterrestrials out there. They do want us to know about them. They want us to connect with them and invite them in. Because again, they can't go against our free will, but if we invite them to connect, then they are so eager and excited to do so.
And that's what I've heard from anybody that has had an experience like that. They're like, you don't understand how all loving they are and how they're literally trying to help us. And again, It's that human ego that's like pushing it away. So I love having these honestly like normalized conversations about it, right? Like it feels like coffee talk where it's like, yeah, so yesterday me and Gray were hanging out and you're like, oh yeah, well my Arcturian friend. Like I really do think that we're gonna get to a reality like that. Cheyenne and Lisa probably aren't going to be physically incarnated for this, like we're way off. But I do feel like that somewhere in the cosmos it will get like that. And this silliness of nothing being out there it'll just be a laughable comedy skit on however we entertain each other in the future,
Definitely.
Well, I love all of your information. I love all of your work, but for all of my friends out there that want to get some human design, sound healing, some regression, therapy, channeling, I mean, I wish I had your whole list memorized. Your business card's got to be like this big. I love it, and it keeps increasing. But what is the best way to get a hold of you?
So on my website, 2 different ways to get there. One is mysticmanta.com. You can also go to drlisajthompson.com. And on my website, at the very top, I actually have a free 20-minute meditative journey to meet your galactic family and guides. And so that's something that I would encourage anyone, if you're interested in starting that conversation, that interaction, that's a really good place to start for free. And you can do it over as many times as you want. And the people who take these journeys, I think oftentimes they're really kind of shocked at who comes through for them. And sometimes it's been entities that they've had fear on, like reptilians or grays, but then other times, if there isn't that fear factor, it'll be a beautiful energy being, or maybe a Pleiadian or Arcturian, or, whoever's coming through is meant to connect. You're always, whatever shows up in your life, you are intimately connected to.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I could just keep going all day and have you talk to me about all of this. It makes so much sense, and I love all of your background too, like how you've really been able to like bridge the spirit and science of it.
Thank you.
I love your work. Keep doing it. I hope I find myself in Hawaii in a couple years on one of your UFO tours.
Yes, please.
I can't wait. Well, all my friends, the description below. You have plenty of time to scroll down and check out Dr. Lisa Thompson if you want to go have a UFO tour, if you would just, like some sound healing, some human design. You can do in person or Zoom online. Yes.
Correct.
So please reach out. That's what we're here for. And thank you again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And anytime you want to come back, please come back and educate us on all the work that you're doing.
I appreciate what you're doing, Cheyenne. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Alrighty, my friends, before we get out of here, Vitality Exposed is going to bring us Neovaii. I tell you, I know I play this music all the time, but I just love it. It's great, and he gave me permission for all of his songs. So, you know, gotta make sure we get those artists taken care of. So go download the song, please. I love you all to pieces for doing it. But we have Daggers from his latest album, Twilight. Neovaii, go check it out. I love you guys. I'll see you on the next episode.